This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes and members across 150 countries who come together to find inspiration and take the next step in their creative journey. I came across this class by Thomas Frank on Real Productivity: How to Build Habits That Last, where he talks about building habits which could help with productivity and how you can cope mentally in order for you to reach your goal. A lot of things he talked about are things that I can truly resonate with, but during a very busy week or month or even year, it can be hard to keep track, especially when you've overworked yourself. So this class was just such a good reminder to have clear priorities and declutter your goals so we can start tackling our task one at a time. For me, I know there's a lot of things coming my way this year, and I found that this class helped me to focus on my goals. So if any of you guys feel that you need a boost to stick to your New Year's resolution in 2022, this is the class for you. The first 1,000 people to click the link in my description box will have access to 1 month free trial of Skillshare Premium, where you can have access to this class along with all the other classes Skillshare has to offer without the distraction of ads. And there's also new premium classes launched each week, so there's always something new for you to discover and explore with Skillshare. Thank you again, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Hi everyone, this is Nia, and today I'm going to be painting blue thistles. It's the new year, and since end of years are usually quite busy and hectic, I wanted to start the new year with something simple. Like usual, let's begin by drawing it out. The main shape of the flower is basically like a tiny egg with pointy needles all around, and you also want to keep the contour lines in mind so you know how to create the texture of the flower in order to give the shape a little bit of volume. The needles itself wraps around the surface, but since there's going to be a lot of foreshortening going, I simplify it by just drawing out tiny dots or circles around the surface with only the needles on the side of the egg shape. Now this is the fun part to paint. They have pointy leaves, which I think is supposed to be the sepals of the flower. They all point outwards, and I like to draw out the direction of the leaves first, so I can just follow through with the details afterwards. What I drew out was basically the midrib, and as for the leaves, I draw them pointing out on either side from the leaf veins. However, as I paint later, because this is going to be fairly small, I'm just going to simplify it by just drawing lines pointing on either side of the midrib. Now let's look at the different points of view of the flower. The first flower that I drew out has a side view, which is why the leaves or the sepal is mostly just around the bottom portion of the flower. However, if you want to paint yours looking from a slightly higher point of view, this should shift the bottom center to not be right at the edge of the bottom, but slightly higher. And the way I help to indicate this is by making the egg shape slightly more round, and also through the position of the leaves, which would be visible at the back as well. When I'm painting the flower from this point of view, I'd prefer to paint the leaves first before the needles, so I can just place the needles while avoiding the leaves so it doesn't look too busy. Let's just recap with a simpler drawing. For this one, the visible center would be near the edge at the bottom, so the leaves surrounding the egg shape is more or less at the bottom surrounding the egg. And when I shift the center, though this would be covered by the egg, you can imagine the leaves growing from that center while avoiding drawing out the leaves from the egg shape, but you can see it a bit more at the back because you're looking from a higher viewpoint compared to the previous one, which is from the side. Let's just have a look at how I'm going to put them together. I'm going to combine a main flower with a bunch of small ones, but as the stem branches out, It grows out from the radial leaves, just like what the flower grew out from. So whenever I want to add a new branch, I'd add more of those radial leaves to connect the branch from the main stem. And the leaves can also grow in between the stems or branch, so you can add them on as additional elements later if it suits your composition. So as an example, I can draw another stem branching out from here, and I'm just going to draw a small version of the radial leaves before I draw on the smaller flower on top. And you can just keep playing with this and branch out more flowers if you would like, and you can even combine a couple of main stems if it suits your composition. Next, let's go over the color. This is Indigo by Schmincke, French Ultramarine by Daniel Smith, Sepia by Holbein, and Viridian Hue by Holbein. Let's go right into painting. I started with a medium consistency of French Ultramarine, and I'm just dotting around to create the egg shape. I'm just trying to map out the shape here because I still wasn't sure about the positioning, so I'm still shifting it around and trying to make the shape that I want in comparison to the size of the page. When I dot the egg shape, I use a fairly light brush load so the dots doesn't become puddles, and it also dries off fairly quickly. That way I can leave out a bit of white negative space here and there, and the shape doesn't look too bulky. After that, I switch to my liner brush, and again I use medium consistency and a light load on my brush, flicking it outwards from the egg shape so I can create really fine pointy lines. Moving on to the leaves, I'm going to use a mixture of Viridian Indigo with a little bit of Sepia to mute the color, and this will create a dark blue-green color that is slightly muted. I like to use the mixture of Indigo with Viridian and put it to one side and place the Sepia on another side of the palette and just trying to mix it little by little so I can adjust how muted or how dark I want the green to be. I switch back to my larger brush again, and I'm just mapping out where the placement of the leaves are going to be, just like how I drew them out before. And after I drew out the midsection of all the leaves, I use a really light load in order to create those pointy edges. Once I've mapped out the leaves lightly, I go back in with a thicker consistency and place them in certain areas to give a little bit of depth and perspective to the leaves. After this, I'm going to go back to the flower again. I use a light consistency indigo, and I'm just going to dot one side and enhance the roundness of the egg shape. For the sides, I made the dots closer together, and as I reached the middle, I made the placement a bit more sparse so the transition between the color is slightly softer. The dots are fairly large, so I switched to my small liner brush and added more dots. This way I can create different sized dots so the texture looks a bit more believable. I'm just going to keep building on the dots until I have a round form that I'm looking for. Sometimes I like to also mix the indigo with French ultramarine if I feel like I need a softer transition between the colors. This is the main large flower, which is why I'm putting more time into the textures, but as for the rest, I'm not going to add this much detail. Going back to the leaves, I use a thick consistency of the green with added sepia to add finer leaves, especially smaller ones at the bottom to connect to the stem. I'm going to paint another one. So again, I started with the French Ultramarine, and I'm going to make this one smaller. As you can see, the color is a bit too dark, so I decided to add water to soften the color. Unfortunately, this is a staining paint, so it doesn't move too much, but that's okay because I'm still going to build on the texture on top, which will cover the mistake. I think I forgot to also mention before, but around the sides I tried to make the edges uneven so it's not a smooth egg shape. And then after this, I just followed it up by adding the needle texture using French Ultramarine with my liner brush. Again, I flick my brush from the flower outwards, and if the position is a bit hard to get to the correct angle, I just rotate my sketchbook so it's easier to paint accurately. Next, I'm going to paint the leaves. I stick with my liner brush this time to paint the leaves because this one is quite small in comparison to the one before, so adjust your brush size according to the size of your painting. For the leaf sticking upwards in front of the flower, I use a thick consistency green to make the leaf look a bit more visible in comparison to the rest of the leaves, which I just like to play around with the values accordingly. Now I'm going to go back to the flower itself. I'm going to build up the dots using indigo, and just like the leaves, I decided to stick with my liner brush to add on the texture. Once I'm done, I'm going to think about how to put the two flowers together, so I'm just visualizing the position of the stem before painting so it meets roughly at the point I want them to. For this, I use the light consistency of the green first, so I'm able to build the color slowly, and it's easier to slightly shift the line in case I made small mistakes. I also went back to my larger brush to paint this because I don't want the stem to look too thin. I want it to look sturdy but not too thick. The stem of the smaller flower looks quite long, so I broke up the length by adding the radial leaves, and I'm just going to paint it using the same colors. This time though, because the stem is thin, it doesn't cover the leaves at the back, so for those leaves I use the thick consistency to paint it on and leave out the stem in front with the lighter value, so now it looks like the leaves are surrounding the stem. From here, I'm just going to figure out how I want to create the composition for the rest of the small flowers and how it's going to branch out. And I'm also going to add the large leaf surrounding the main stem, which branches out into the flowers that I painted earlier. Just like the leaf that I painted earlier, I'm also going to use a thick consistency to paint the leaves at the back to give the impression of the perspective and which leaves are at the back and which ones are at the front of the stem. Here at the bottom, since I added the stem branching out on the left, I'm also going to add a smaller radial leaf. You can technically make the leaf big for this one, but I think it'll make the composition awkward, so I made it smaller than the one on top. On the left here, I want to add a small flower, but this time I want the view to be slightly from above. The flower might be tilted to an angle which gives that viewpoint, or it's just slightly lower. So I'm just going to place the leaves at the back of the flower, just like how we practiced as I was sketching it out. And just like the sketch, I painted the leaves before painting the needles, so the lines look cleaner. The top here looks a bit empty, so I decided to add another small flower as well. This just depends on your composition. You don't have to create the exact same composition, and you can add more or less flowers according to how you want to set up your painting. Okay, so I feel like I have enough flowers in my composition, and to finish off the painting, I'm just going to line the sides of the stem using a thick consistency of the green mix to make the stem look less flat. And after that, I'm just going to look at my painting to see if I need to make final adjustments. I decided to fix up some of the leaves, and that's pretty much it. So this is the finished painting. It's super simple and fun. I haven't made short videos like this for a while, but I hope you guys still enjoyed these types of simpler paintings. Like usual, all the list of tools that I used for this video will be in my description box, as well as my social media links. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!